Welcome to A Perfect Touch. I'm Jeanette. A fashion icon of the 1920s, the cloche is a hat style that has spanned decades. A 1908 invention by the French milliner Caroline Ribot, cloche is French for bell, which defines the close to the head shape. Indeed, Ribot's cloche-style hats were often cut and formed on the client's head. With many options for brim shapes and embellishment, the cloche remained popular through the 1920s and 1930s. It fell out of style in the 1940s and 1950s, with a resurgence in the 1960s. Again, popular in the 1980s, it has remained a much-loved style, even showing in the 2008 Dior collection of cloche-inspired hats. I've loved the cloche styles worn by the ladies in the Downton Abbey series and movies, and a favorite fashionista, Miss Phryne Fisher. I had acquired a pattern in a costumers destash group for a Decades of Style pattern company 1920s Tierific ensemble, which features contrast bias binding finishes on the edges of the overblouse and tiers. A 1920s cloche sewing pattern named Vivienne is offered by Elsewhen on Etsy. It is for sizes 19-inch to 25-inch. The options are wonderful to create multiple fabric and pattern designs with or without bias binding for the brim and pleated embellishment. I decided to pair the dress and cloche patterns using bias binding for both. I purchased, downloaded, and printed the pattern, and following the very clear instructions, found my head size and cut the pattern. There are just 3 pattern pieces: A, cloche crown, B, brim, and C, pleats. When the Downton Abbey series was in full swing, Andover Fabrics created entire selections of cotton fabrics designed to reflect the personality of the characters. Some of these fabrics can be found on the secondary market today, and I was fortunate to find one in a beautiful brick red with a feather print. This fabric will be used for the 1920s tiered dress and a portion of the cloche. I found a beautiful coordinating fabric by Andover from the Lady Sybil collection, and will use this as the main body and brim of the hat. The instructions are very thorough, outlining recommended fabrics and stabilizing techniques for your specific fabric. For my lightweight cotton, I'll be using a medium-weight fusible interfacing. I cut 6 panels for the cloche crown outer layer, the lining, and brim and pleated sections. 6 panels are also cut for the fusible interfacing, leaving a smaller seam allowance. Both sides of the brim will be cut from the same fabric, and the fusible interfacing is also cut, all with seam allowances as instructed. A trial with this fusible interfacing showed that there were some marks on the exterior of the fabric, so I fused the interfacing to the lining crown panels. The interfacing is fused to 1 brim piece. 3 panels of the crown are sewn together, and the seam allowances pressed. Top stitching on either side of the seams keeps the seam allowances in place and creates a finished look for each panel. Now the 2 sections are sewn together and top stitched at the seam allowances. The lining is sewn the same way as the outer crown, omitting the top stitching. The lining is placed inside the crown and the edges basted together. The 2 sides of the brim are laid wrong sides together and the seam allowance cut away from the outer edges. A black satin bias binding is stitched around the outer edge. To give the pleat embellishment interest, I used each different fabric on either side, and will decide later which fabric will be the main and which will peek out from inside the pleats. The fabric and interfacing are cut. The interfacing is fused to one side of the pleats. As with the brim, the seam allowance is cut from the edges basted, and the satin bias binding sewn around the edges. The pattern is used to practice the direction of the pleats, and then the fabric is pleated, marked, and sewn to hold the pleats in place. The brim and pleats can now be pinned to the crown, adjusted as desired, and the positions marked. With the pleats removed, the brim can now be sewn to the crown and the seam allowance turned inside the crown. A grosgrain ribbon is sewn to the crown with one edge at the stitching line. The pleats are now attached to the crown as desired, leaving the point free and covering the end where all the pleats meet with a cloisonné button given to me as a bonus with a vintage button purchase. It is perfect for this cloche, which is now finished. I started this dress diary telling you about the popularity of the cloche. In my 1930s wardrobe research, I found a cloche in a Sears catalog offering from 1930 with the same beautiful pleated embellishment and the brim left forward. So if you are looking for historical accuracy, here it is. With the hat complete, it is time to work on the 1920s terrific dress, which will be the next dress diary. Thank you for sharing your time with me.